Okay, so today we are going to discuss on how are we going to display the contacts of a certain user. Okay, so this is how are we going to do so that we could display the contacts of a certain user into our list view. So from the login page, so we have here the login page. So we are going to call the contacts page. Okay, and when we're going to call the contacts page, we are going to pass also as parameter the user ID, so that we would know then what are the contacts that we are going to retrieve from the database. Okay, so going back, login, then we are going to pass the user ID, and using then that user ID, we are going to contact the API that is going to retrieve the contacts of that certain user through the ID from the database. Then it is going to return back here the retrieved contacts, and we are going to display them into a list view. Okay, so generally that would be our procedure. Now, what I want you to take note now is we have this what we call as future in Flutter. So when you say future, if ever you're familiar with JavaScript, these are how do you call that? In JavaScript, it is called the promise. Okay, so meaning we are going to wait for some time before these contacts or these records are going to be retrieved into our application. So therefore, we are going to use here a future object. And so that, and take note also that those future data that are going to be retrieved from the database are going to be displayed into our list view. Okay, so therefore in this case we are going to use a future builder. Okay, so I think that's only the thing, the only new into this video now, the future builder. Okay, so we're going to go now to our code. First we have here our okay, so we have here our API that is going to retrieve all the contacts of a certain user. Okay, so first is we are going to get the user ID. Okay, so once we get the user ID, then we are going to issue then our SQL command that is going to retrieve all contacts where the user ID is equal to the submitted user ID. Then prepare, bind, execute, and return the values or the records. It could be either 0 or all or many records. Okay, so that's for our get contacts API. Okay, then into our code. So since we are going to submit our user ID, so we are going to here. Okay, so if ever that the login is successful, so we are going to navigate to the next page, or we have the contacts list that dart. So we have this one. So how are we going to call this one here at the same time submit or the ID by the user? Okay, so what we're going to do is we are going to create a constructor for this object or for this class. Okay, so that we are going to require the ID of the user. So I'm just going to have here int user ID. Okay. By the way, I want also the name of the users because I want to display also. Okay, I want to display the name of the user here. Okay, below. So I'm going to have a string, then user, let's say the full name of the user. Okay, then I'm going to create a constructor with named parameters. So with this curly braces here, as we are going to have our parameters, these are called named parameters. So I'm just going to have it required, then this that user ID, and the other one also a required parameter, required, then this that user full name. Okay, so we have now the user ID and the full name. Okay, it's just immutable, so I'm just going to have here the keyword final. Okay, so take note of the changes. So I have modified our constructor. Okay, so that when we are going to call this class from main or from our login, okay, so we are then going to supply what is this? We're going to supply the values for those parameters. Okay, so we're going to use our navigator, that push, then we're going to have context and material page route. Then we're going to have here our builder. By passing our context, then returning then our I'm just going to use the fat arrow notation, then contacts list. So as you can see here, as I have written my contacts list class, so it automatically gives us the name parameters that we have defined into our contacts list class. Okay, so this one here, user ID, so user, then index 0 of USR ID, and also we have the user of index 0, then on the column USR full name. Okay. Okay, so what we're doing here is we are calling now contacts list with the user ID and the user full name. Okay, so save. So where did I get this user ID and the user full name? It is actually from our table. Okay, so our table for the TBL users, we have here the user ID and the user full name. It is because I want to display the user full name here, and I'm going to use the user ID in getting or retrieving the contacts of this certain user. Okay, so here the very first thing that we're going to do before I'm going to have the build, okay, before we're going to draw our widgets, I'm going to have here first, I'm going to have the method or the function to call or to retrieve our records. Okay, so as I've said, we are going to use here a future, okay, of type list. Why list? It is because uh, the records are actually in the form of a list. Okay, so I'm just going to have it get contacts. Okay, and by the way, since it is a future, so therefore we're going to have an asynchronous function here. Okay, so the very first thing that we're going to do is we're going to define our URL, which is http localhost / flutter, the usual. We have flutter / API / get contacts .php. Okay, then we're going to define our map, the data that we're going to submit. So we have string dynamic. Then we're just going to call it query params is equal to. Okay, so since our API needs a user ID, okay, so therefore we're going to have here user ID, then with the value this one here, okay, the one that we have defined into our class. Okay, so how are we going to access? Because if ever I'm just going to have it here, user ID. So as you can see, this method as of now could not actually access this variable here. So what are we going to do is, since it is now part of the class as the field of the class, so we're going to call it through the widget. So as you can see, widget of this class, okay, that user ID, that to string. Okay, so since we have now our parameter, okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is we are going to call that response. Then we're just going to call it response is equal to http .get. Then we are going to parse our URL above, and then we are going to have that replace. We're going to actually concatenate or include the parameters. Okay, our parameters are with a name parameter, name query parameters. So I'm just going to have our query params as we defined it here. Okay, so we have an error. So we're going to include okay, so we're going to import actually here our import, then our package. http.dart as http. Okay. Oops, we have an error. A value of type future response. Okay, so this is a future response cannot be assigned to a variable type of response. Okay, because why? It is because this is a future object. So we're just going to have our await keyword. Okay, so once we have awaited, now in your case you're going to have a try catch here, but I'm not going to include the try catch so that you could understand the procedure, so that we are going to have lesser codes. Okay, so that's why I'm not going to use here my try catch. Okay, so after that we are going to validate if response dot status code is equal to 200, meaning if ever we have a successful connection to our API. Okay. Else, meaning it is not successful, so we're just going to return a blank or an empty list. Okay. But if ever successful, so what we're going to do is we are going to create contacts is equal to JSON decode, then we have response dot body. Okay, then return contacts. Oops. Return. Okay, so we have now our method or our function that is going to retrieve the contacts of this certain user, this ID. Okay, and if ever it could successfully retrieve records, it could be either 0 or many, so we are going to return it to the calling function. Okay, so when are we going to call this get contacts? Let's save it first. So okay, I'll have it on the build. Okay, save it here. Now we have this is what we call as wait. Before it is going to call the build method, there is this what we call as did change dependencies method. Okay. Oh, I don't have it here. Save. Wait. Okay, maybe it here. Did change dependencies method. It is a void method that is going to be called after the init state. By the way, we also have an init state method in which init state is going to be called when this object is inserted into the tree. By the way, init state is going to be called first. Then after the init state, where we are going to initialize, by the way, whatever variables that we have, then it is going to call did change dependencies. As you can see here, it is called immediately after init state. Okay, so after the init state, it is going to call by default this one, then the build method. Okay, so therefore in our case, I'm not going to call it on the init state. It is because we are dealing here with future objects. So I'm just going to have it here on my did change dependencies. Okay, so before it is going to call the build method, so we are going to start calling then our records on the did change dependencies method. So take note, it is an overridden method. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to have, okay, I'm just going to call it my list. Then I'm going to call get contacts. Okay, then after that I'm going to use a set state method that is going to assign, by the way, I don't have yet the list. Okay, so I have here the list of type dynamic. Then I'm just going to call it contacts list is equal to blank or empty list. Okay, so it would be this list that is going to contain then the contacts that is going to be retrieved from the database and display it into our list view. Okay, so here I'm going to have contacts list is equal to my list. Okay, I'm having an error. Okay, so since get contacts, by the way, is a future, so therefore we are going to have the await keyword. And if ever we to have the await keyword, it must be, this method must be an asynchronous method. Okay, so with this, it is now going to retrieve all of the contacts from our database. Okay, okay, let us try. I'm just going to have here print, then we have my list. Save and reload. Okay, so what I'm doing here now is I'm going to log in, then I'm going to print only whatever would be our the records that are going to be retrieved. Okay, save it here. Oops. We have pitok 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so as you could see, we have now here in JSON format, we have now the records or the contacts for pitok. Okay, so how about for kulas? Because as you can see here, based on the previous video that I have shown you, on our TBL contacts, pitok has a lot of contacts. Number 2, by the way, is kulas, so he has only one contact. So let us try if we could get, oops. Okay, I'm just going to reload because I want to log in by using now kulas, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, invalid. No, I think it's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so you could see here, it has a single contact. We have kulasa. Okay, so we have now successfully retrieved the records from our database or the contacts for the current user. So the next thing that we're going to do then is just to display it on our UI. Okay, so I'm going to have here our body. Then I'm going to have we're going to have a column children. So first I'm going to have a text that is going to display let's say my contacts. Then with the style text style, then font size, let us say 20.0. Okay, so here would be our list view. Okay, and the last we're going to have another text. Another text that is going to contain the name of the current user. And how are we going to get the current user? So as you can see, we have here our full name. Okay, so I'm going to have here widget that user full name. Save. I'll try it first. Okay, my contacts and the current user, as you can see, we have Pitok Batulata. Okay, so the only thing that we don't have here now is we have our list view. So how are we going to display our list view? As I have said, by the way, when Flutter executes init state, then did change dependencies, it is not going to wait for this one here. Okay, it is not going to wait for the future value here. It is going to directly display then our widgets. Okay, so if ever we're going to have our list view here, what will happen is that it is going to display a blank or an empty list view. Okay, so there goes now our the one I said at the start or at the beginning of this video that we're going to use our FutureBuilder. Okay, creates a widget that builds itself based on the latest snapshot of the interaction with a future. Take note, this widget here will depend on, will depend on its interaction with a future. And in this case, we have our future defined below. Okay, so first it is going to ask us for the future. And as we have now defined our future object here. So I'm just going to copy that, then I'm going to paste it here. Okay, so that's, I'm just going to move it down. Okay, next is we are going to have our builder. Okay, so what would be our builder? Okay, we have here, we are going to pass the context, the current context, and it mentioned, by the way, about something about a snapshot. Okay, snapshot. So when you say snapshot, this is actually the data. Okay, it is the data that we are going to work with later on. Okay, so now the future builder can return any widgets, okay, and that will depend on the result of the snapshot that we have here. So for example, we have different states. So while the future, okay, while the future function still retrieving, take note, still retrieving the records, okay, so meaning the records hasn't arrived yet, so therefore on that state we call it waiting state. Okay, so we are going to have here a switch, okay, that is going to determine the current snapshot that wait, okay, it's capital S. Okay, so we have here capital S, that connection state. Okay, so case we are still waiting. Okay, so connection state, that we have it here, waiting. So while we are still waiting, we are going to return, okay, as simple as circular progress indicator. Okay, so take note, if we are still waiting, we are still going to display the circular progress indicator. Okay, case connection state that done, meaning we are now done with our connection state. It is possible the records are now returned. Okay, but then it is also possible, while we could say it is done, but it is possible that there is an error. Okay, so that is why we are going to validate if snapshot that has error. If it has error, so therefore we are going to return I'm just going to return a text that displays there is an error. Snapshot. Okay, and if ever there is no error, so we are going to display a list view. Okay, then last, just in case, so we have here our default statement. So maybe there was an error, so I'm just going to have it's just going to do nothing. Okay, so on our default, we're just going to do nothing, because if ever there's an error, so we're going to have it there. Okay, so next is we're going to display our list view. Now, again, if ever I'm going to have the list view here, it is possible that we do not know how many records do we have into our list view. So that is why we are going to create a list view builder. So I can have it here, but it is better that I am just going to have a function that is going to create a context list view. Okay, so we're going to return ListView dot builder. Okay, okay, but before we're going to return, we are going to have the item count. Oh, not there. Item count, that would be contacts list dot length. Okay, the only thing that we lack now here is we are going to have our item builder, which is going to we are going to pass our context and the index. Okay, then we are going to return. Okay, I'm just going to have the card so that we're going to have a background. Then with the child, we're going to have our list style. Okay, so in our list style, so card. Okay, I'm just going to have the leading for, I'm just going to have an icon, icons that okay, phone, I'm just going to have the phone. Then our title, we're going to have our text. Okay, then we're going to have contacts list, then of the current index. Then we're going to have contact underscore name. Then for our subtitle, oh wait, I forgot the name of contact name. Then we're going to have contact phone. Okay, so I just want to display the number below the name. Then on the trailing, I'm just going to have an icons that forward arrow, arrow right. Okay, then we're going to call it here. So we're going to call contacts list view. Okay, take note of our future builder. We have here the contacts. It is going to call our contacts, and once it is going to once the snapshot or the data has been returned and it has no error, then we are going to call contacts list view. Okay. I guess we're going to have here, we are going to return. Okay, so let us try. I think this is enough. Okay, let us try. Oops, we have an error. Doesn't allow null. Wait. A non-null value must be returned since the return type widget doesn't allow null. Oh, we have it here. onto our default. We're just going to have this one. Okay, I think that's it. Reload. Now we have that error because FutureBuilder is going to return a widget. Now, if ever it goes to the default, it doesn't return anything. So therefore, it is going to return null. So therefore, we have that error before. Okay, so let us try. So we have ptalk, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Login. Oops, we have an error. Okay, box with no size. So therefore, we are going to have an error for here. Now, there's some let us try the string crop, but this is limited. We're going to set it to true. Let us try. In this case, I think there's a problem with the string crop. Still, we have an error. So the best way actually to solve for this error is we are going to wrap this one with an expanded widget. Ptalk, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so we have now our list of contacts by, we have here current user, we have ptalk. Okay, you could scroll it here. And by the way, still we don't have any action yet for our clicks. Okay, so next, by the way, if you have just noticed, okay, so when we first opened this one, there was actually a circular progress indicator, but due to the speed, we were not able to notice it very well. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, so that we could see it here, I'm going to create, okay, so when we are going to call our future, I'm going to create here a delay. Future that delayed. So take note that the only purpose of this one is just to actually simulate the delay. Okay, duration of, let us say, seconds. We're going to have, okay, 3 seconds. And since, by the way, it is a future, so we are going to issue the command or await. Okay, again, the purpose of this one is just to have a delay of 3 seconds so that we could see our progress indicator when we first opened our page. Okay, so again, ptalk, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so we have here, oh, it is not centered. Then we have here our progress indicator. Then we have our records. Okay, so as you can see, it is very big. Okay, so we could adjust actually. Maybe we could have, I guess we're just going to have a column. I'm just going to have a column here. Column. Okay, then so that it is going to be centered vertically, we're going to have the main axis alignment, that center. Then I want all to be centered, so I'm just going to wrap my column with center. Save, reload. One, two, three, four, 5. Okay, we have it here. Oh, 3 is so. Okay, so we have here now our records. And by the way, we are not, by the way, limited to only one widget for our circular. So I can have here a sized box of height, let us say 20. and I'm going to have a text with loading or retrieving records, whatever. Maybe we're just going to have one. Sige, two. Okay, so you can see here loading, then we have the progress indicator. Okay. Again, I'm just going to remove this because, as I have said, this is just actually to simulate the loading animation that we have. Okay, so as you can see, we have now displayed the records. But I am going to have, let us say, we're going to have Kulas, then 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Login. So loading. Then we have the lone contact of Kulas. So on our next video, in our next lesson, we are going to learn then how are we going to add contacts. And by the way, I have also created here, if ever you have no account yet, so a user can register. Okay, but here, by the way, we are going to have a floating action button here. Okay, so we're going to draw a floating action button so that on our next video, we're going to go directly with the coding for the add contacts code or module. Okay, so we have here floating action button, floating action button. Then we have the on pressed, and we have the child, which is an icon dot add. Then we could have, okay, I'm just going to have colors that blue. So we now our floating action button. So we're going to improve the UI on this on our next video. That is, how are we going to use post? Because so far, what we have are actually, we only use so far get. So we get, and also with our here with our login, we have also used get. So in our next video, we're going to then have our post, wherein we are going to insert records into our database. Okay, so that's all for today. I'll see you on the next video.